one.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Ray Tampa podcast. Our podcast offers bold commentary on various subject matters with a laser-like focus on truth. My name is Ray Tampa, and I'm the host of the Ray Tampa podcast. We have in our studio two talented and intelligent gentlemen, Mr. Russell Cato and Mr. Jamie Wilson III. Also, we have in the studio, or we have the distinct pleasure of having in the studio Mr. Deveron Gibbons, a true community influencer, business executive, educational leader, political leader, former St. Petersburg mayoral candidate, and more. Mr. Gibbons, welcome to the Ray Tampa podcast.
Thank you all for having me. It's really an honor to be here with such three distinguished men who, over my career, I've looked up to. Thank you guys for having me.
Really appreciate having you. Mr. Gibbons wrote a powerful piece that appeared in the Tampa Bay Times on Saturday, September 16th, 2023. Mm-hmm. The article concerns the Tangerine Plaza property on 18th Avenue South in St. Petersburg. He highlights two distinct proposals that are on the table for city leaders to consider for the redevelopment of that property. Very interesting, very informative. To begin, let's talk about some of the hugely successful experiences you've packed into your relative young life. Number one, we all know you were born and raised here in St. Petersburg.
That's right.
Where did you attend college?
I went to the University of Florida, USF. Went to an executive program at Harvard, and then Florida A&M for my last two degrees.
All right, quite a bit. And the last two degrees, what were they?
MBA and a Juris Doctorate law degree.
Law degree, MBA. My God. Please share with us some of your business experiences.
So interesting you asked that question. So most people know I was at Holland and Knight after starting my own business with a young lady by the name of Liz Goodman. We had our own lobbying firm, and we had a contract, and Holland and Knight came and bought us out. And by virtue of that, I began to represent a company called Scott Financial. Mm-hmm. And in representing Scott, I represented them before the legislature and in Washington, and in various states they had different business interests. So we worked on those particular interests as well. But it came across the CEO's desk, a guy who I really, really respect, Mr. Ian McKechnie. By the way, he dropped out of school in the 10th grade, and this is his third billion-dollar corporation that he started.
Wow.
And he came to me one day and he just said, "Hey, I see you have real good business acumen," and said to me, "We'd like for you to be more involved in the business side." And at that time, I was just primarily doing governmental affairs and making sure that the company was protected from the regulatory standpoint, and also because it's a heavily regulated industry when you talk about being a financial services company, because you're regulated by the cabinet, the Office of Financial Regulation, the AG here in the state of Florida, and then you also have the federal regulatory bodies that oversee the Treasury, FinCEN, and some other folks that oversee that particular product and industry. Mm-hmm. And he was just like, I would really like for you to help. And so we started to do some business thing. I started to negotiate deals within Scott, and then got moved up eventually to third highest in the company after he and his son, to senior vice president. And I was handling all of the business items, negotiations for the company. I mean, just a myriad of things, but primarily the most important thing was I went from having a budget on the business development side of zero to growing it over $3.5 billion of revenue that came into the company. And most of that was with bill pay, where you can go in and pay your utility bill, your whatever. And that was the fastest portion growing within the company that allowed for us to make more money. AMSCOT, while people, they pointed at it and say, "Oh, it's predatory." Well, there's no predatory living in Florida. I helped write the laws on the here in Florida on what's called Chapter 560, which is called deferred presentment, and all of it is everything that they do is capped. And it's not at an interest rate; it's capped. Like if you borrow $500, it's $50 is the most that you can borrow. Pay back, you pay $50 back. But if it takes you 1 year or 37 years, it's still that same $50 because there's no additional fees or interest that can be charged. The only thing that can happen to an individual in the state of Florida is, their name goes in a database, they can't take out another loan. So I grew within the company, having a lot of flexibility, a lot of responsibility, and it was a good run, a good career. And then I got a call from some folks that wanted me to look at helping them help shape some regulatory framework. And so I've been doing that for the last couple of years, working with a product called revenue-based financing. And that allows for you small business up to $2 million. You can say Jamie says, "Hey, I own a concrete business, right? And I need $700,000 to win a contract." If you go to the bank and you say, "I need $700,000," it's a bunch of paperwork and probably 6 months before you can get it. These folks will get you the money tonight after looking at your bank financials, and then you pledge a portion of your future receivables. So it has been a career where I didn't think I would be in finance, but it ended up being as such. And I've had, thanks be to God, that I've had a good career in making and helping to create and make jobs and making good decisions to help people create and foster an environment that allows for access to capital for small and medium-sized business, and then in the AMSCOT side for just individuals to make sure their families are okay.
Quite impressive. And I want to move to another area of your background, and that is education. You're on the board of trustees for St. Pete College. How long have you been on the board?
Since 2004, so about 19, 20 years.
19 to 20 years on the board of trustees for St. Pete College. And I also understand that you were recently selected to be on another institution of higher learning's board.
Yes, sir. So I serve also on Bethune-Cookman University's board and Florida A&M University's board.
Oh my God. Very nice. I don't know too many people on 3 college boards. I don't know that many people. Well, actually, I don't know anybody on that boards.
Well, the reason that I think that's important is men like yourself sitting here have poured into me. Goliath Davis, I could keep going on my dad, especially my mother, made it very clear to me that the more education you receive, the less racism you'll see. Because you'll be able to recognize it, number one, and number two, you'll be able to fight it and fend it off. And I believe that Go Davis did an article, I think it was last week, and he was talking about the new Jim Crow. That is exactly right. The education, keeping our kids from getting a quality education, is the Jim Crow of the future. And these kids and young people all want to be social influencers, but they don't want to go through what it takes to get to be a social influencer and understand what it means when you get there. For example, Mr. Tampa, you can do this show, and you, Mr. Cato, and Jamie can do this show because you've been through things within this community and other places. What we tend to see now is everybody says, I remember when I was in school, here's a perfect example. I said I was going to college, right? Everybody knew you were going to college.
Right.
Like I would see Mr. Cato, he'd be like, where are you going to school? You knew you were going to college. Right. Now these kids like, I'm going to be a rapper. I'm going to be a social influencer. I'm going to get on the internet. I'm going to be like Kim Kardashian. I'm going to be the next Kanye West or whatever. And that's difficult because you got to think about it. There's a whole lot, not just in the U.S., there's a whole lot of people across the world that you're competing against now because the internet has made it like it's across the street.
Right.
So, so yeah, it's very different now. But that's why education is important. And I refuse to leave the St. Pete College Board because that's where I learned how to read. My mom used to go to school, as you well know, at St. Pete College, junior college, and she would drop me in the library with Miss Jones. And remember Miss Jones, and Miss Jones taught me how to read. And when I got to Melrose, her roommate was the principal over there. So, I just think that was such a big influence to me in my life, and I really think that St. Pete, and it's the first step. You know, it's the first step for people. You know, you used to call it the 13th grade. It's no longer the 13th grade, but we are there for a reason to be accessible to all the community.
We can go into so many aspects of your life that are very significant in our community in terms of high achievement. But I want to, since this is only a 30-minute show,
yes,
we're going to go to the article that you wrote that appeared in the Tampa Bay Times on Saturday, the 16th of this month, really yesterday, as of this taping yesterday. I want to ask you about that article in terms of what was your reasoning for writing that article?
As you all well know, I was very active in Rick Baker's campaign. It was very, very, very difficult after he got elected to get that plaza there. The land was assembled. We have been to Publix. We have been to Winn-Dixie. We have been to a lot of places, and every one of them had turned us down. So much so to the fact it was almost as hard as getting the post office done. I remember Go Davis and I had to literally, we and Rick Baker had to talk to the postmaster, Michael Jordan, in Memphis to get him. And then we had to get George Bush, who was president at the time, to put the post office on 16th Street, right? It was just that hard to get a grocery store in that community. We had to then talk to Jeb Bush about the grocery store now. And he got us conversations with just about every CEO there was that ran some type of grocery chain. Publix was adamantly opposed to it. While they were very nice and had conversations with us, they just weren't doing it. Winn-Dixie was going through like a change the guard. And then Sweet Bay took over Winn-Dixie at that time, and we got lucky. And they came in and they had, I'll never forget, I think Go Davis did a report, and I happened to be a part of that particular team of people that the mayor trusted to listen to that report. And it talked about the highest grossing Sweet Bay stores in the country. And that store was one of them. I think it was like one or two. When you looked at products being sold, that it was one or two. And then when it shut down, Sweet Bay, because they got bought and they were just closing stores, it had nothing to do with, people are under the impression it had to do with stealing and all that. It had nothing to do with that. They just got bought out by another chain. And we literally had to go to Bentonville, Arkansas to get Walmart to come in. Now, Walmart was a different beast because they wanted that. They wanted to make sure they had the liquor store. They wanted all those things. But the mayor at that time, Bill Foster, just didn't pay attention to what was going on. And Kreisman, it ended up closing on Kreisman's watch. And he didn't even know who the manager was. I was very close to a lady by the name of Monicia Brown, who is still with Walmart. And for the Southeast, she kind of handles their operations and government and that kind of stuff. And the reason I wrote the article, though, to get to the real point is, if you look at the rest of this city, Publix has 2 stores on 38th Avenue North, right across the street from each other. Right? Literally a stone's throw away from each other, right? You can walk from one to the other. If it's something you don't have in this one, you can literally go across the street and get the other one. And if you look around the city, everywhere in this city, the amenities that communities need are there, except for in Midtown. And while growing up, we didn't have everything, but we had a lot of stuff. And I think that this community not only deserves to have, not be a food desert, not have small African-American businesses that are thriving, because we can have those. One of the reasons that I pushed so hard, Mr. Tampa, I went to Tallahassee and got the $17 million for the Midtown campus, because you got to have butts in the seat on 22nd Street to actually have those services. So the more people that are down there that are running around, circulating, that's going to help that whole area thrive. And so I wrote the article because it really is a travesty if we do not protect that. We can continue to put housing everywhere. I think that this administration is really focused on trying to do a baseball deal. And in that trying to do the baseball deal, I think they think that affordable housing is the number one issue. But if you don't have jobs and services and other things in our community, it's not going to do you any good to do any of that. You're not going to be able to afford housing. And if you live there, then where do you go to shop? Where do people, right now, I can tell you 10 or 12 people that have to catch a bus down here to Aldi or 34th Street to Publix or downtown. And it's really not fair that our community doesn't have the services and amenities that others do.
In your article, which was a well-written article, very, very informative, very interesting, as I stated earlier, I want you to zero in on the article as you highlighted two different proposals that are on the table for the city to consider relative to that property. So
one proposal really talks about having to pay $20,000 a year for 75 years. And for the last 4 years, this group has not been able, Sugar Hill has not been able to acquire the funding needed or the package needed to accurately acquire the facility. And if you have 4 years, there's something wrong either with you or the deal, right? In deal making on where I'm from and the stuff that I do, they say, the longer a deal takes to do, probably more than likely it's not going to get done. And then you have Robert Blackman, who I think, I'm not going to sit on here and advocate whether he's right or wrong on issues, but if he offers the price that we need to pay for the building, there's an appraised value of the building. There's some value for that particular piece of property. And he's offering that particular price. Why would we not take that as long as it's an accomplished developer, because he's done that. And now he's got some big deal going down on 4th Street, a coffee shop or something that's I think it's a national chain that's going down there on 4th Street by Harbordale. And he's done other deals. He has done those deals. He's followed through on them and he's done them. So I don't understand why we wouldn't go with somebody who's giving us a fair and equitable price for the property so that the real estate in the community, the value doesn't go down. That's the other thing that people don't understand. When you start giving these sweetheart deals, you also diminish property values around it. And as an administration, you would hope that the mayor and other folks would understand that we don't need property values diminished. In fact, we need to be maintaining property values and also teaching families that live in the community that community is being gentrified on how to maintain and keep their homes. But that's not happening. What's happening is we are so focused on making sure it looks like to me. This is how it looks to me. Anybody can feel how they want to feel about it. That we can't continue to give these sweetheart deals to people because of the color of their skin. We have to do what's right and make sure that we protect the greater community and the things that are around it.
I agree with that.
And I'm glad you said that, because I was about to say what you just said. I agree with that. The color of the skin should not dictate whether a person get the property or not. It's the money. It's the deal. It's the legitimacy of the deal.
And expertise.
And the expertise.
That's right.
Part of the legitimacy. But the bottom line is I applaud you for writing what you wrote, because again, as we read it, I totally understand what you were saying, but I want to make sure our listeners understand, because they may not have read the article. So I'm going to summarize some things you've said. there were two deals. I mean, two proposals. One proposal did not offer money per se, except $20,000 per year over 75 years. They're going to give the city $20,000 a year over 75 years for the rights to develop that property. Then you got another person, another deal, but he just wants to go ahead and buy the property.
Sure.
Extend 1.6 million, which is the appraised value.
It's the appraised value, and the last 4 RFPs that have been put out by the city. That's the amount that they asked for, and he's giving them that.
Okay, so he's not trying to
No,
lowball.
no, he's not trying to lowball.
He's not trying to lowball the city.
No, not at all.
So, from your perspective and most people's perspective, the city should not even be thinking about this. It shouldn't even be a thought.
So who's the hold up with that?
Well, it's a strong mayor form of government, so
okay.
It happens within City Hall, and but Mr. Tampa makes an excellent point. The 75 years, $20,000 over 75 years. If you do the math, you can't even pay the light bill every month.
No, that's a joke.
On that structure, at that rate, and then you talk about taking people seriously when we don't even want to do what's right.
Right.
But you know what? And I'm listening to everyone. But last week we had some panel. Last week we discussed something like this. And I remember this lady saying there are 3 criteria that come into this thing: money, power, and influence. You see, that's my concern. Who benefit from these 3 criteria? And that's my, you know what I'm saying?
I do. And Mr. Cato, to respond to that, you're exactly right. I mean, I think in the article, I pretty much made it clear. If you look at Sugar Hill and the folks that they partner with in this community, everything that they have touched has failed.
Right. So why even consider?
So why consider that?
Yeah. Their track record
is not good.
Right.
The failures
and in fact, one of the folks that's in the deal now was in the last Sweet Bay deal that lost the property. So why would we continue to go down that same track? And it's not a black or white thing.
No.
But as a city, I've noticed that in this community, especially when I go around the country and I'm talking to mayors and other folks, I've noticed that most people bring something to the table with the deals. Here, we always run to City Hall with our hands out as African Americans, thinking they're gonna solve our problems. We're not bringing any we bring political power, but we're not bringing any expertise. We don't have or own anything, and then we expect for them to based upon us helping them get elected to push deals our way that we know are not going to be good for the greater community. It's going to be good for your pocket, maybe for a short period of time, but not for everybody else.
Yeah.
I want to clarify another point. Mr. Gibbons pointed out that the other group involved in the Tangerine Plaza proposals is the Sugar Hill group. So let's clarify for certainty that this is not the same group of individuals that put in to redevelop Tropicana Field. Totally different.
Totally different group.
Right.
Totally different.
And it's good that you mentioned.
No, I went to that.
It's good that you mentioned.
Yeah.
The Sugar Hill group consists of a prominent pastor in our community. If Mr. Gibbons wants to identify him, I'll let him do it.
Hey.
And then we have an insurance executive. I'll identify him, Roy Binger, as a partner in that group. So they have nothing to do with that group that the mayor rejected out of California. Totally different group.
But the pastor was in the group before that had a part of that particular group before. And most of the things that the individual has been a part of, at some point you recognize you're not a business person. Right? I mean, me personally, I would be like, I'm not a business person. I'm not doing well at this. But I'm going to keep using this political power on my pulpit to benefit myself. And that at some point has to stop,
Okay, self-recognition is important. recognize who you are.
Mhm.
And what's
Mr. Cato used to beat up on me about that all the time. Stop.
Recognize what you can and cannot do.
I'm glad you brought up the point about Sweet Bay being the changing of the guard was the reason for it, because everybody thought just like what you said.
No, it wasn't.
They were stealing all that. I was like, they had to be
I
stealing.
mean, no, they were not. I mean, you ask Go Davis,
Yeah.
that was one of the highest grossing Sweet Bays there was. It just so happened because they closed the one on 62nd, and that one is doing fine.
Because you can say, how can it fail when you're in a neighborhood where people don't even have that many cars? So that is you're gonna spend money there.
I'll tell you to what extent the administration, and I'm not sitting here trying to have a love fest on Rick Baker or his administration, but I will tell you that Go Davis went to the extent of going to Sweet Bay and telling them, when you put ham hocks and neck bones on sale, put the collard greens on sale. You'll sell all three, and they listened.
Makes sense.
That's they did. They didn't, because people were leaving to get the stuff that was on sale, and then leave and go to Publix and get like cornbread and other things because it was more expensive. But when the corporation started to listen, the sales blew out of the water.
Right.
Okay, that's an interesting bit of information.
Yeah, I mean, ask him; he would tell you. I mean, he and I used to argue about it all the time. He's like, no. If you got this on sale, this goes with it.
Right.
Right. So I don't want anybody to leave the store.
Right.
When they can get all this stuff at the same place, and that's what they did.
Makes a lot of sense.
You know, in the introduction, I didn't mention that Mr. Gibbons was a candidate for mayor in 2009, or did I know?
You did.
Okay, if I did mention it, then the question now is, do you see politics in your future, sir?
I'd never say never.
Right.
Let me just say that. I personally don't think it'll be anytime soon, Mr. Tampa. But I'll never say never. I love this community. I will tell you that there was only one job that I would ever run for, and that was mayor. Because I believe that mayors have the power to really influence and change lives. And I saw that because I helped write the Baker plan, and one of them, as you well know better than anybody else, was the portion on education. We didn't have anything to do with the education system, but we found corporations to partner with every school, gave out top Apple awards. I mean, and we really changed the face of education in the city. We guaranteed kids college scholarships if they kept a C average and stayed out of trouble.
I want to jump in because on a previous podcast, I stated if I didn't agree with anything else Rick Baker did, I did agree with his education program. As a matter of fact, it was Deveron that I asked to introduce me to Rick Baker when he was running for mayor the first time.
He did.
And the three of us, Rick Baker, Deveron, and myself, met downtown Beach Drive.
We sure did.
And we talked, and it was the education piece that really sold me. And I was certainly in favor of Rick Baker's campaign at that point. So I say to you, you're right. That education piece was very significant.
It is. I mean,
he did some other good things.
He did some other good things, but that education piece was the rock and foundation of the whole campaign, to be honest with you, Mr. Tampa, because as all of you know, the first thing that executives, when they move to our town, look to, they say, what are your schools like? While the executive might be able to put their kids into a private school, what is the rest of his employees or her employees going to put their kids? They want to know that it's a safe, clean, good learning environment.
Oh boy.
Right. And education, again, is the fuel to success. I mean, if you're going to be successful, you can't attach yourself to dangerous things. You got to attach yourself to positive and good things going in the right direction. And we saw that as the trajectory. And I would tell you, if I ever ran for anything, whether it be Congress, mayor, city council, my focus would be talking to parents about, let's get our education system right in St. Pete. The rest of the county, I can't worry about. I'm not the superintendent of schools, but we would get back to a focus of where, for example, I don't know why this administration didn't do it, but I would be focused on taking, they've gone up on this parking fees downtown. There's so many tickets. Why wouldn't you take $1 out of every ticket and put it towards education in the schools?
Do either of you have a question?
Yeah,
I do, but I also have, a comment as well. I asked you about a year ago. I said, would you run again at Sam's?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, but I will say, hearing this in your background, and you're not one to toot your own horn, but you have done a lot at a young age for this city. And
oh my God.
I mean, you have what it takes.
Yes.
You were going to run. I mean, you have the experience. You've
Yes.
done the work even before considering being mayor. You did the work. So you would be a good person to be mayor.
I'll let Mr. Cato respond. He had a question.
Well, no. Here's what I'm looking at.
Thank you, James.
Yeah.
I appreciate
And
it.
I knew Deveron before this accolade of him. But here's my concern. Rick Baker, Rick Kreisman, Ken Welch, 3 mayors, 3. And we in this kind of position still? Well, that's what I'm looking at. We're going through 3 people here. You fought for Rick Baker, my partner right there. Kreisman, you were a big supporter. Now we got Ken Welch, but we in the same damn predicament.
But Russ, you know, we get to the
Wow.
part where you are making a comment and we have to cut it short. And the reason is we've reached that point in time. We have to call it quits. I just been alerted that time is over. So let's thank our guests.
Thank you for having me.
For being here.
Yes.
Excellent information.
Yeah, no,
I'm always
Yeah, you should all be proud. All. And I want to thank my co-hosts for an excellent conversation. As always, thanks. We want to thank our listening audience on 99.1 FM The Bird for tuning in each and every Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. to listen to the Ray Tampa podcast. And we also invite you to tune in or to type in the Ray Tampa podcast on YouTube, and you can see them all. So at this point, we say good evening.